Jinnah of Pakistan by Stanley Wolpert. Chapter 3, Calcutta, 1910 to 1915. On January 25, 1910, the Honorable Mr. Muhammad Ali Jinnah took his seat as Muslim member from Bombay on the 60-man Legislative Council convened in the capital of British India. The old council chamber in the palace Lord Wellesley had built more than a century earlier was freshly gilded for this historic meeting, filled to a capacity with bejeweled visitors as Viceroy Minto pompously addressed his government's newly elected advisors, including Gopal Gokhale, Motilal Nehru, Surendranath Banerjee, and Muhammad Ali Jinnah, predicting, "I am glad to believe that the support of an enlarged council will go far to assure the Indian public of the soundness of any measures we may deem it right to introduce." Minto's pious hopes were soon shattered. Jinnah clashed with the viceroy the very first time he rose to speak in the council, addressing himself to a resolution that called for an immediate end to the export of indentured Indian laborers to South Africa. The violent repressions of Satyagrahis, non-cooperators, led by Gandhi in the Transvaal, had ignited feelings of indignation and grief throughout India the year before. Congress then resolved to press upon the government of India the necessity of prohibiting the recruitment of indentured Indian labor for any portion of the South African Union and of dealing with the authorities there in the same manner in which the latter deal with Indian interests. This matter came before Calcutta's council on 25th February, when Jinnah spoke out saying, "It is a most painful question, a question which has roused the feelings of all classes in the country to the highest pitch of indignation and horror at the harsh and cruel treatment that is meted out to Indians in South Africa." Minto reprimanded him for using the words "cruel treatment," which the viceroy deemed too harsh to be used for a friendly part of the empire. Within his council chambers, "My lord," Jinnah responded, "I should feel much inclined to use much stronger language, but I am fully aware of the constitution of this council, and I do not wish to trespass for one single moment. But I do say that the treatment meted out to Indians is the harshest, and the feeling in this country is unanimous." That first brief exchange reflected Jinnah's courtroom as well as council style. He always chose his words carefully and never retracted any once uttered. His critics, whether judges, viceroys, or pundits, usually received humiliating tongue lashes for any barb aimed at him. He was not known to sit silent for the slightest reprimand, honing his razor-sharp mind and words on the generally duller weapons of logic or wit drawn against them. Lord Minto, appalled at Jinnah's response, was struck dumb by it. Mr. Raleigh left India that summer, replaced by a much sharper liberal statesman, Sir Charles Hardinge, 1858 to 1944, who became one of Jinnah's foremost official admirers. A career diplomat by training, Hardinge's sophistication and intelligence set a new tone of urbanity and responsibility in Calcutta's council. He was John Morley's choice for India. Lord Kitchener, then Commander-in-Chief of the Indian Army, had lobbied energetically for the viceroyalty he coveted, but when King Edward VII died in May 1910, Kitchener lost his most powerful ally. Morley offered India to Hard at the royal funeral. The new viceroy was quick to recognize, shortly after reaching Calcutta, how debilitating a thorn Bengal's partition remained in his new domain's body politic. His first major policy recommendation to Morley's successor at Whitehall, Lord Crewe, 1858 to 1945, was to reunite Bengal, creating the separate province of Bihar and Orissa at the same time. On March 17, 1911, Jinnah introduced his first legislative measure, the Waqf tax-exempt Muslim endowments validating bill that was to emerge 2 years later as very first non-officially sponsored act in British Indian history. London's Privy Council had invalidated testamentary gifts of British Muslim property left in tax-free trusts Waqf for ultimate reversion to religious charity in 1894. Jinnah called for legislative reversal of that decision, charging it was opposed to the fundamental principles of Islamic jurisprudence. Probate law became Jinnah's most lucrative special field of knowledge and legal interest, one he remained master of at least until 1941, as is attested by his handsome leather-bound set of probate court law reports from 1888 to 1941, still preserved in his Wazir Mansion library in Karachi. His probate clients were to include many of India's wealthiest princes, among them the Nizam of Hyderabad, the Nawab of Bhopal, and the Raja of Mahmudabad. Even as Bengal's partition did so much to help create the League, King George's surprise announcement in Delhi that partition was annulled in December 1911 jolted that organization out of its loyalist rut. The Nawab of Dhaka read in Britain's reversal of partition, the government of India's capitulation to Congress, agitators, and a simple new message to all Indians: no bombs, no boons. Together with his announced annulment of partition, King George V proclaimed his government's decision to shift the capital of British India from Calcutta to Delhi's historic plain, where a new imperial city was to be built. Delhi had been the capital of Muslim sultans and Mughal emperors who reigned over most of the subcontinent since the early 13th century. Delhi remained at the hub of North India's Muslim population, educational centers, and historic monuments, within easy reach of Lahore, Agra, Deoband, Aligarh, and Lucknow. On December 23, 1912, however, when Lord Hardinge passed through Delhi's Chandni Chowk, Silver Market, atop the elephant, leading a vice-regal procession to the new capital, Delhi almost became that viceroy's graveyard. A bomb hurled into Hardinge's howdah killed one of his guards and lacerated the viceroy's back, exposing the shoulder blade. The would-be assassin of one of India's most popular viceroys was never apprehended. Jinnah attended the annual meeting of Congress as well as the council meeting of the Muslim League, both held in Bankipur in December of 1912. He had not as yet actually joined the League but was permitted to speak to its council at Bankipur, supporting a resolution that expanded the League's goals to include the attainment of a system of self-government suitable to India, to be brought about through constitutional means, a steady reform of the existing system of administration. By promoting national unity and fostering public spirit among the people of India, and by cooperating with other communities for the said purposes. A few months later, he went to Lucknow, joining Mrs. Naidu on the platform as an honored guest at the larger League meeting, where a new, more liberal constitution was adopted. President Shafi, in presenting the new constitution, noted that I am in entire accord with my friend, the Honorable Mr. Jinnah, in thinking that the adoption of any course other than the one proposed by the Council would be absolutely unwise. The League's first resolution congratulated the Honorable Mr. Muhammad Ali Jinnah for his skillful piloting of the World Validating Act through the Imperial Legislative Council. Faced with such acclaim, Jinnah could hardly resist renewed appeals to join the Muslim League, pressed upon him that year by its new permanent secretary, Sayyid Wazir Hasan, 1874 to 1947, and Maulana Muhammad Ali, 1878 to 1931. revered pan-Islamic alim and editor of Comrade, both of whom were deputed to London to lobby there for Muslim demands. Jinnah did agree to join in 1930, but he insisted as a prior condition that his loyalty to the Muslim League and the Muslim interest would in no way and at no time imply even the shadow of disloyalty to the larger national cause to which his life was dedicated. In April 1913, Jinnah and Gokhale sailed together from Bombay for Liverpool to meet with Lord Islington, Under Secretary of State for India and chairman of their Royal Public Services Commission, on which Ramsay MacDonald, 1886 to 1937, also served. That leisurely trip was their longest interlude alone, but no record was preserved by either of the subjects they discussed. Though the Commission agenda, General Council reforms, and ways of attaining Hindu-Muslim unity and ultimately of achieving Indian independence were surely among them. Gokhale later told Sarojini, who often visited him at his Servants of India Society in Pune before he died, that Jinnah has true stuff in him and that freedom from all sectarian prejudice which will make him the best ambassador of Hindu-Muslim unity. How ironic that prediction sounds, yet in his late 30s, Jinnah seems to have personified that tragically elusive spirit of communal unity. Jinnah returned to India in September 1913 and attended the Karachi Congress 2 days after celebrating his 37th birthday. He had not visited his place of birth for over 17 years, and he now warmly expressed his pleasure at finding a number of personal friends with whom I played in my boyhood. He drafted and moved a resolution for reconstructing the Council of India that called first of all for charging the salary of the Secretary of State and his department to the English home rather than Indian budget, thereby seeking to save Indian taxpayers the burden of maintaining Whitehall's entire English staff. The new council, Jinnah argued, should consist of not fewer than 9 members, at least 1/3 of whom should be non-official Indians chosen by a constituency consisting of the elected members of the imperial and provincial legislative councils. Half of the remaining nominated members of the council should be public men of merit and ability, unconnected with Indian affairs. The other half, ex-Indian officials with at least 10 years of Indian experience, no more than 2 years old. The council was to be purely advisory rather than administrative, and tenure on it would be limited to 5 years. Thanks to his work on this resolution and indicative of his rising position of leadership within Congress, Jinnah was chosen to chair a Congress deputation to London in the spring of 1914 to lobby members of the Parliament and Whitehall on Lord Crewe's own proposed new Council of India bill. Jinnah also seconded a Karachi Congress resolution congratulating the League for adopting the ideal of self-government for India within the British Empire and expressing complete accord with the belief that the League has so emphatically declared at its last sessions that the political future of the country depends on the harmonious working and cooperation of the various communities in the country. From Karachi, Jinnah entrained for Agra, where the Muslim League met on December 30th to 31st, 1913, in the former twin city capital of the Mughal Empire. He was busily at work seeking a formula for bringing his two political organizations together on a single national platform. His position was unique, for not only did he belong to Congress and the Muslim League, but he was also inside the government's camp both in London and Calcutta. Not even Gokhale and Sir Firoz Shah were so strategically positioned to hear all the views on the major issues affecting India's political future. At the Agra session of the League, Jinnah proposed postponing reaffirmation of faith in the principle of communal representation for another year, urging his co-religionists that such special representation would only divide India into two watertight compartments. Congress had just deferred action on that question, and Jinnah explained there were many other reasons for his urging postponement upon the League, though he could not give any of these reasons in public. The latter probably alluded to his shipboard conversation with Gokhale or London talks with Wedderburn and other MPs of the British Committee of Congress. At any event, he was obviously pursuing a joint platform such as one he would help fashion for Lucknow in 1916. The Muslim League voted, however, to reject Jinnah's first formal appeal to them, deeming the principle of their affirmative action separate electorate formula absolutely necessary to League's immediate future. It was one issue on which a majority of the League's members would long remain at odds with Jinnah. He sailed again for London in April of 1914. Other members of Jinnah's prestigious deputation included Congress's Bengali President-elect Bhupendra Nath Basu, 1859 to 1924, and Lal Lajpat Rai, who arrived a few weeks later. Lord Crewe met with the Congress deputation soon after they arrived, finding Jinnah the best talker of the pack, though he considered him artful for having remarked, as it were casually, that they would be glad if dissents in my council now be recorded and laid before Parliament on the motion of a member. By historic coincidence, Jinnah and Mohandas K. Gandhi, 1869 to 1948, were both in London at the start of the World War I. Barrister Gandhi had gone to Natal in then to work for an Indian Muslim trading company in South Africa, and he remained more than 2 decades devising and testing his satyagraha, hold fast to the truth, technique of non-violent non-cooperation in the Transvaal as well as in Natal from 1907 to 1914. The war's outbreak diverted Gandhi's ship home from South Africa to London. When he arrived there, however, the first message he uttered to the world was to urge his countrymen to volunteer for military service and think imperially. Jinnah attended the gala reception for Gandhi at London's Cecil Hotel, but joined neither the army nor the field ambulance training corps raised by the Mahatma. Jinnah's own mission had ended in total failure. All English hearts and minds were preoccupied with war, with no one giving a moment's thought to Indians' reforms. The work of the Islington Commission went down the same tubes of indifference that swallowed change for the Council of India. Morley quit the cabinet in frustration and disgust at how eagerly his young Liberal colleagues, led by Lloyd George, Edward Grey, and Winston Churchill, rushed towards the precipice of Armageddon. Passionately impulsive, self-righteous, puffed up with pride and dreams of glory, they all expected a swift, easy victory. Kitchener alone, who took charge of the War Office with waxed mustaches as sharp as the top of the Kaiser's helmet, envisioned a long, blood-drenched battle of titans almost equally matched in manpower and armor. Initially, India became a warmly supportive, totally loyal allied mine of troops, wheat, money, and vital material, including leather goods, uniform, and pig iron-shaped vests throughout the war. In November of 1914, however, when the Ottoman Caliph opted to link his empire's fortune and forces with the Central Powers rather than joining the allies who had courted him, Indian Muslims' loyalties were sorely challenged. As Islam's world leader and deputy of God, the Caliph was revered far beyond the limits of the Ottoman Empire. British intelligence feared that the Nizam of Hyderabad, India's leading prince, was soon trying to buy Turkish rifles for possible use in South Asian pan-Islamic revolt. Such rumors proved in fact completely groundless, and though a few Muslim units had to be disarmed for following year in Singapore, virtually every Muslim soldier in the British Indian Army proved true to his salt, and Pathan northwest frontier as well as Punjabi Muslims remained with Sikh and Gurkhas, the backbone of the British India's army. Muslim regiments were used without action in Mesopotamia itself as well as on the Egyptian and Western European fronts. The Muslim League held no meeting, however, in December 1914, reflecting the deeply divided feelings of its leaders and their fears of inadvertently providing a forum for expressions of pan-Islamic anti-British sentiment. By January of 1915, Jinnah was home. The Gujarat Society, Gujar Sabha, which he led, gave a garden party to welcome Gandhi back to India. The Mahatma's ambulance corps had sailed for France without its founder after he had a slight nervous breakdown in London and decided to return home to India instead, thus prolonging his life by some 3 decades. Gandhi's response to Jinnah's urbane welcome was that he was glad to find a Mohammedan not only belonging to his own region's Sabha but chairing it. Had he meant to be malicious rather than his usual ingenious self, Gandhi could not have contrived a more cleverly patronizing barb, for he was not actually insulting Jinnah after all, just informing everyone of his minority religious identity. What an odd fact to single out for comment about this multifaceted man whose dress, behavior, speech and manner totally belied any resemblance to his religious affiliation. Jinnah, in fact, hoped by his Anglophile appearance and secular wit and wisdom to convince the Hindu majority of his colleagues and countrymen that he was indeed as qualified to lead any of their public organization as Gokhale or Wedderburn or Dada Bhoy. Yet, here in the first public words Gandhi uttered about him, everyone had to note that Jinnah was a Mohammedan. That first statement of Gandhi's set the tone of their relationship, always at odds with the deep tensions and mistrust underlying its superficiality, polite manner, and never friendly or cordial. They seemed always to be sparring even before they put on any gloves. It was as if subconsciously they recognized one another as natural enemies, rivals for the national power, popularity, and charismatic control of their audiences, however small or awesomely vast they might become. Gokhale's death in February 1950, followed a few months later by the demise of Sir Firoz Shah, left Jinnah virtually alone. Dadabhai remained in London for his final 2 years at the head of Bombay's Moderate Congress. Tilak, released from Burmese prison exile in June of 1914, was the undisputed hero and national leader of the new Congress party. The Lokmania's popularity was unrivaled, yet he was almost 60 and ailing, and would rely more on legal remedies, some entrusted to Jinnah, than revolutionary agitation for the last half decade of his life. A new luminary in the constellation of Indians' nationalist leadership was Mrs. Annie Besant, 1874 to 1933, who came to Madras to preside over the Theosophical Society funded by her guru, Madame Blavatsky, and stayed to edit New India and start her Home Rule League in 1915, thus inspiring Tilak to do the same a year later in Pune. Mrs. Besant's Irish temper, silver-tongued oratory, and inexhaustible energy were focused in 1914 to 1915 on seeking to reunify the still divided Congress. Jinnah did his best to help, working dexterously at the same time to bring Congress and the Muslim League together for their annual meetings in Bombay. The December 1915 sessions of Congress and the League were first held within walking distance of one another, facilitating attendance at both by members interested in fostering Hindu-Muslim unity and hampering out a single nationalist platform. Satyendra Sinha, who presided over that Congress, was not as yet appointed Under Secretary of State in Whitehall. He and Jinnah now worked together to fashion a formula agreeable to all political factions and communities. While reiterating Congress's general major demands for reform, Sinha focused on three specific matters concerning which he had found practical unanimity of opinion. The first called for army commissions for qualified Indians and military training for the people. The second for extension of local self-government, and the third for development of our commerce and our industries, including agriculture. The Muslim League met under the presidency of Bengali barrister Mazharul Haq, 1866 to 1921. Another Congress liberal committed to fashioning a joint platform acceptable to both organizations. Several league leaders had argued against holding any meetings this year, fearing that what was said at it might embarrass the government during the war. But President Haq argued that our silence in these times would have been liable to ugly and mischievous interpretation. There is no such thing as standing still in this world. Either we must move forward or we must go backward. It is said that our object in holding the League contemporaneously with the Congress in the same city is to deal a blow at the independence of the League and to merge its individuality with that of the Congress. Nothing could be further from the truth. Communities, like individuals, love and cherish their individuality. When unity is evolved out of diversity, then there is real and abiding national progress. There were nonetheless many members of the League who strongly resisted any effort at rapprochement. Angry dissidents led by the mercurial Maulana Hasrat Mohani, 1875 to 1951, moved to adjourn this meeting of the League at the start of its second sitting on December 31st, 1915. Jinnah had just been recognized by the chair when Maulana Mohani jumped up to shout, "Point of order." The president ordered him to please sit down. Other Urdu-shouting Orthodox Muslims rose inside the huge tent erected near the seashore on the marine lines to support Mohani's attempt to adjourn the meeting before Jinnah could move the creation of a special committee to draft a scheme of reforms. Some angry mullahs who filled the visitor rows of seats started yelling at the President Haq, "If you are a Mohammedan, you ought to appear like a Mohammedan. The Holy Quran asks you to dress like a Mohammedan. You must speak the Mohammedan tongue. You pose to be a Mohammedan leader, but you can never be a Mohammedan leader." Similar anti-Western revivalist sentiments would be hurled at Jinnah for the rest of his life, even after he was hailed the League's Qaid-e-Azam, great leader. A number of bearded Pathans in the audience rushed and shouted angrily in Pashto. Hasrat Mohani called Urdu the only proper language in which to hold Muslim League proceedings. Everyone in the crowd of several thousand was standing, many shouting at once, some wildly waving their arms. Jinnah helped escort the ladies in attendance outside and found Bombay's Commissioner of Police, Mr. Edwards, nonchalantly standing near the tent, keeping his men inert. Jinnah told Edwards that the crowd inside had become so disorderly that meeting could not proceed and that those causing the disturbance were public visitors who had been admitted out of courtesy and by ticket. He asked the commissioner's help to clear the tent of non-members, offering to refund the money instantly of anyone who had paid for a ticket. Edwards refused to be of such sensible service, however, insisting he would use his force only to clear the tent entirely if informed that the situation inside was out of control. Jinnah preferred to urge Public Haq to adjourn the meeting, and he met with the League's leaders later that day in the President's house to plan for the next day's session. The Muslim League was reconvened on New Year's Day 1918 in Bombay's elegant Taj Mahal Hotel. Attendance was strictly limited to regular members and the press. President Haq opened the meeting at 10 a.m., commenting briefly on the previous disorders, then called upon Mr. Jinnah, who was received with the loud cheers. As president of the Bombay Muslim Students' Union, Jinnah was the idol of the youth and uncrowned king of Bombay. Raven-haired, with the mustache almost as full as Kitchener's and lean as a rapier, he sounded like Ronald Colman, dressed like Anthony Eden, and was adored by most women at first sight and admired or envied by most men. He reported Commissioner Edwards' pig-headed behavior to cries of shame from his audience, then moved the unanimously carried resolution to appoint a special committee to formulate and frame a scheme of reforms in consultation with other political organizations, the two parties of Congress, which would allow them to demand a single platform of reforms in the name of United India. That resolution was greeted with loud applause. A committee of 71 leaders of the Muslim League was appointed, representing every province of British India, and chaired by Jinnah's close friend and client, Baja Sir Muhammad Ali Muhammad Khan Bahadur, the Raja of Mahmudabad. The committee members from Bombay included Aga Khan, 1877 to 1965, and Jinnah. Those from Punjab were led by Sir Muhammad Shafi, 1889 to 1932, and Mia Sir Fazli Hussain, 1877 to 1938, while the Bengal contingent had A.K. Fazlul Haq, 1893 to 1962, in its ranks. Before that meeting in Taj ended, President Haq remarked upon the great work done for the League by his friend Mr. Jinnah, adding, the entire Mohammedan community of India owed him a deep debt of gratitude, for without his exertions, they could not have met in Bombay. In a unique tribute, the President then turned to Jinnah saying, Mr. Jinnah, we, the Mussalmans of India, thank you. It was the first such tribute Jinnah received from the Muslim League, but would not be his last.